Hey, this is Steve, and you are listening to the Falafel House Fantasy Football Podcast, a part of the BS Podcast Network. Enjoy the show.
In a world of ordinary fantasy football podcasts, ordinary guys rise up to bring you extraordinary analysis and entertainment. This is the Falafel House Fantasy Football Podcast with your hosts Kevin Cotillo, Sal Lito, and Stephen Marcus.
I see the crystal raindrops fall, and the beauty of it all is when the sun comes shining through to make those rainbows in my mind when I think of you sometime, and I want to spend some time with you, just the two of us. We can make it if we try, just the two of us.
Just the two of us.
Just the two of us, building castles in the sky. Just the two of us, you and I. We look for love, no time for tears.
Just the two of us. Weekend. That's right, baby. It's just the two of us tonight. There's no Kevin here on
Finally.
the Falafel House podcast. It's just my good friend Steve and me. What is up, Steve-O?
Oh, not a whole lot. Man, how long has it been since we've been waiting to do a podcast, just the two of us? How long has it been?
Yeah,
It's been a long time.
It's been too long, really. I think we did one during the regular season where Kevin was drunk and hungover or something from a Patriots game, and
That's right.
maybe it was the one that they lost. I don't know. But Kevin is on vacation, and I mean, we're here and we're keeping you awake tonight, which is a good thing. So Kevin usually comes right in and says what the day and date is. I'm not doing it. I don't want to.
I don't know what day it is.
Yeah, who cares?
Kev's on
Because when you listen-
vacation. I don't have to pay attention to what day it
Yeah.
is.
You won't even know when you listen to this. It'll be like, it might be Tuesday for you. It might be Thursday for you. It might be Friday for you. But whatever day it is, thank you for joining us. Steve, you could catch Steve on Twitter at SidSkeet. You could catch me on Twitter at LitoSal. And you could catch us all on the Falafel House Twitter at Falafel House. So we're not going to waste too much time. We have a special guest tonight, Mr. Chris Harris, and we are going to get right to the interview now.
Good evening. We interrupt your currently scheduled podcast to bring you a conversation with someone whom you may actually care about. The Falafel House podcast proudly presents their interview of the week. Please do enjoy.
So we are welcoming back into the Falafel House a very special guest from HarrisFootball.com and the Harris Football Podcast, Mr. Christopher Harris. How are you doing this evening?
I am doing very well. Thanks so much for having me on.
Do you know why you're a very special guest to us?
I believe I may be your first second timer. Is that right?
You're not our first second timer, but
Okay.
you are the very first fantasy industry guest that we ever had.
Yes.
Last March, you came on with us, and we were really terrible back then. So we're really privileged that you came back on with us now and are giving us another shot. Tell us, how did things improve for you after getting a falafel bump last year? I'm sure, you know.
I really like to eat falafel. It's delicious.
Hey, we'll take, any way that you can incorporate falafel into your life. We're very, very happy to take it. You'll notice that we're missing one person tonight, and it is your New England Patriot fan, Kevin Cotillo. Our usual show host is away on vacation with his family this week, a much-deserved vacation for Steve and me.
Yes, that's right.
So we figured it was a good time to schedule you and not have him here to really screw things up for us. So, Chris, NFL draft is about a month old now, and we've been steeped in dynasty rookie auctions and all the craziness with rookies that goes on this time of year. So we're going to start off with some rookie questions. I'm going to let Steve jump in right now and get it rolling.
Yes,
Rock.
Yes, indeed. You had waited until after the draft to put out your initial rankings, and rightly so. All your reasons for doing that, well noted, make a lot of sense. You don't want to have to move people around based on their landing spot. Well, once they did come out, I noticed something that seemed to be a little different for you, and that is the fact that you had the 4 top rookie running backs all ranked within your top 20. And I just wanted to know, is that more of something to do with them being that good, or does that have more to do with just the mediocrity of the position after you get past the first 6 or 7 guys in the running back list?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think it's probably more the latter. I mean, I think there's potential for Leonard Fournette to be unbelievable. Like, he could be Bo Jackson, right? He's probably not going to be, because rarely people are, it turns out. But he could be awesome, but like, he also could be not. He doesn't have a lot of side-to-side movement, so I don't feel super sure that he's Bo Jackson, and I think Christian McCaffrey's a little small to be a feature back, and Joe Mixon may be the best prospect of all of them, but God knows if he's going to be able to stay on the field. There are, to say the least, character questions, and Dalvin Cook, who we all loved in college, he's tests out as maybe not the lateral guy that we thought he was, lateral quickness guy, and yeah, I think there's quite legitimate questions with all of them, and maybe to some degree, the reason they're all inside my top 20 overall running back list is, like you say, I mean, I don't know. I get out of like the top 5, and I start to throw up on my mouth a little bit, like, so maybe it's that terrible thing we do with the bright and shiny object that we don't know its flaws, where I'm maybe hyping them up too much. I don't know. By the same token, I look at the names below him, and I'm not finding a lot of names where I feel guilty about it. I'd rather take the chance on Dalvin Cook than I would Jeremy Hill or, I don't know, Ty Montgomery. Like, I feel like I know what those players are, and the fact that I don't know what Dalvin Cook is like, that's not a great reason, but I feel like it's kind of my reason.
Cool. So we're looking at your rookie list now. The list you have up, you don't have your dynasties up, order up as I saw last night, but you do have your list of rookies. And I'm presuming those are the rookies you expect to have the biggest impact this year. Is that the order that you have them in?
No, and I probably should make that page. That's rookie draft. That's for a rookie dynasty draft.
Oh,
that's
okay. So excellent. Yeah. So the 2 guys that make it into your top 10 that I have not seen in a lot of other people's top 10, and I'd love to hear you talk about them here, are Zay Jones and Curtis Samuel. So
sure.
Tell us what you see about those guys that put them up higher for you.
So to some degree, I'm sort of flying blind until we get to the fall and we know where, or at least the late summer, and where we know where people fall on depth charts. And I'm definitely willing to lower them at some point if it seems like they're not going to play. I get to Zay Jones, and I think I certainly have questions about the unbelievable productivity in college, because it's a completely 5 wide, ridiculously wide open. Like, there's almost nothing that translates to the NFL from what he did in college, but it's still 100 million catches. and then he goes to the Senior Bowl, and everybody sort of who sees him up close says, whoa, okay, now I actually am comparing him to other potential NFL wide receivers, and he's standing out. And then athletically, he compares pretty well to the non-super elites in this class. And then he lands in Buffalo, where you could probably make a convincing case that at some point he could be an absolute target hog, and it could kind of happen soon. But it is pretty speculative, I admit. Like, if I'm comparing him, the problem is, again, you want to say, let's pick a name at random. I'm not even looking at my list, but I know I have O.J. Howard lower than him. And I'm talking about like a rookie dynasty draft. So I'm not even criticizing Howard for not being worth anything in his first year. I'm saying, I'm not even making him a top 10 pick for the dynasty purposes. And the reason I'm doing that is because I don't need to reach for tight ends. Like, I'm going to always be able to find a tight end. And unless O.J. Howard is Gronk, which I don't think he is, let somebody else take him and hold on to him for 3 years until he's good. And in the meantime, I'll just have been happy having whoever, like Kyle Rudolph, as my tight end. So I have a dearth of names that I feel like, in a dynasty draft, I think I'd take the shot on the kid who's kind of surprisingly small, mid-level school kid who has a lot more ability than I think we thought. And when it comes to Curtis Samuel, he's small, and he's on a team right now that has Christian McCaffrey and Jonathan Stewart, but I think he gets worked in, and he's an unbelievable open field player. And if you told me he's Tyreek Hill, I wouldn't be that surprised. So I'm willing to take a shot on that upside again, feeling like, maybe at some point we make him a running back, which gives him maybe more appeal. But I think both of them, knowing what I know at this exact moment about their combination of athletic ability, situation, all that stuff, I say I'm kind of interested, but I'm definitely going to be willing to temper that in a couple of months.
Yeah,
That was a long answer. I'm sorry.
no, it was good. It's definitely a great point on the tight ends because with those big three that came out, they got a lot of hype, and they are in a lot of people's top 10, all three of them. So I think that's definitely a good point on them. Some of the other bigger...
Can I just ask you? Can I ask you guys, like, how does that jibe with, since you've been talking a lot about Dynasty, does that jibe with how you feel about, like, every time I ever in a rookie draft for a Dynasty league take a tight end, like I've had Zach Ertz for a few years, drafted him in whatever, the third round or something. And I'm like, did I need to bother? Like, can't I just find the equivalent of Zach Ertz anywhere? Can I pay, $3 in my auction for him? Like, what was my point, and let alone taking him in the first? Do you guys feel the same way about tight ends, or could you at some point find yourselves taking OJ Howard in the first round of your rookie draft?
Sal, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm a big tight end guy, right? But I agree with you. And I think that this class, in particular, there's actually some more guys like Jake Butt and some guys even later on in this class that you might be able to find another diamond in the rough. We've done mostly auctions so far this year. I've had one rookie dynasty draft, and we had to actually buy the pick. So the earliest pick I had in that was a 206. So I haven't had that option yet. I had a guy going back and forth with me last night about Njoku. I believe he had the 108 or the 109, and he was asking me if Njoku or Kamara, and I thought go with the pass catching running back in the Saints offense. That if you look at the numbers over the years of how many passes are thrown to running backs in offense, go with this guy. Njoku's going to Cleveland #1, and who knows when he becomes a big, important, valuable part of that offense. So I could totally see what you're saying. And I know you're a big film guy, and I don't get to watch as much film as you do. So I was really hoping to hear from you, which I believe I did, the reasons why those would be guys. I could probably grab those guys in the second round and get a really good value on them. And we went division by division the last couple of weeks, NFL draft rookie look back. And Samuel and McCaffrey, we felt like they were kind of similar players, but I like that. I like the idea that they could have those two guys, and you could have one guy flank one side, one guy the other, coming out of the backfield the other way, and teach Cam to dump the ball off to these guys and preserve his body a little bit. So I think they're in for a big change in Carolina this year. I'm very interested to see how that offense flows.
I mean, if you think about it, that right there is almost like a Patriots draft, right? Getting McCaffrey and Samuel. That's what they're trying to do. They want 1 million pass catching running backs because they see that's how the NFL is going. I think it's smart. And listen, Tyreek Hill's a nightmare. He's a nightmare for fantasy. What do you do with Tyreek Hill? Like, I have no idea. But if Curtis Samuel's Tyreek Hill, he has to be reckoned with. Who wouldn't right now go back to last year's Dynasty rookie drafts and put Tyreek Hill as a top 5 pick, right? We all would, even though he's a total nightmare because he's going to touch it 6 times a game. 3 of those are going to be long touchdowns, though. Sorry to interrupt the question, but I was interested in what you thought.
No problem whatsoever. We're going to talk about some more wide receivers. These guys are more of the bigger names from this draft. I was wondering if you thought guys like John Ross and Mike Williams, they went to teams with established wide receiver ones, with Keenan Allen on one team and A.J. Green on the other. A lot of people did not like that. They didn't like that they went to these teams. They didn't think that the situation played out as well as maybe Corey Davis's did, where he's going to automatically be the number 1 guy there. Do you think that this hurts their value going to a team with an established wide receiver 1, or do you think that actually will help them?
I think you can't really make an argument one way or the other. I mean, you guys know that on my show, I always talk about crutch arguments.
Yep.
And this is sort of almost the dictionary definition of a crutch argument. You can say that the good receiver prospect going to the team with no established number 1, that's fantastic because there's so many targets for him. But I can make the argument, but the defense knows he's the number 1 and he's going to get the number 1 corner, and it's going to be a really tough transition for him. And then, of course, you can make the exact opposite argument. You can say the kid going to Cincinnati with AJ Green's there, he always has single coverage, so he's going to make a big play every week, or there's not a lot of targets for him. And the fact is, before it happens, we're just not going to know. I've seen it work out either way too many times to say definitively, because just generic situation where there is a number 1 receiver, that means X, right? It's not information that we have yet. And so I think you're probably, if we're evaluating situation, Corey Davis is my number 1 rookie receiver this year. So I'm acknowledging that situation matters. And even though I think of the big three, he's the least proven, playing at the small school and not really going through the pre-draft process. But I would still take him ahead of Ross or Williams. And yet, I could probably make the case that I'll take the person Philip Rivers is throwing to, and give me the bust out. There's a lot of receivers there, but the upside of Mike Williams turning into something good is potentially really exciting and fun. And I believe in Philip Rivers, whereas I think maybe I believe in Marcus Mariota, and I don't believe in Andy Dalton. I mean, I believe he exists, but I don't really think he's good. So yeah, I don't really find that particular part of it persuasive. I think when we're looking at situation, I'll pay attention that there's another wide receiver there, but I want to know about the player first and foremost, and then, tell me about the quarterback, tell me about the offense, and in the end, I do agree with the contention that Corey Davis is probably, a little bit more of an exciting prospect because of the situation, because of the field around him. And I'm hopeful that Marcus Mariota will be good, but it doesn't make me hate John Ross. It doesn't make me hate. I mean, I think what worries me about Mike Williams is it's not just one guy, right? It's potentially two guys. Oh, it's potentially three guys. Like, it's there. At some point you do go, they have a lot of alternatives if he's not quite ready, right?
Yep.
All right, before we move on to some veteran players, I got one last rookie question for you. I didn't think much of Juju Smith-Schuster. I didn't hear anything that I particularly thought grabbed my ear or made me say, wow. And then I see a Steelers reporter, Jeremy Fowler. He says Juju Smith-Schuster could serve in a big slot role as a rookie. And clearly on your rankings, you don't agree with what he said. And I think I lean more with what you said. What is it about Juju that you don't think gets him in play there in Pittsburgh? Is it more a Martavis Bryant thing, or do you just feel like he's, it was an overshot by Pittsburgh?
I can't say that I know for sure that it was an overshot by the Steelers because, we're not just talking about 1 year with these kids. Don't you guys have like an aversion at this point to Steeler receivers?
Named Antonio Brown. Yes.
No,
yeah.
I wasn't even gonna say. I misspoke. USC receivers.
I'm
more worried about USC receivers. And so there's that little bit of a worry. If they're talking about slot receivers in Pittsburgh, didn't we just see Eli Rogers doing a really good job? I don't know why you'd instantly say, it's a different kind of receiver. It's a big body, and quote unquote slot receiver means something different than it meant 10 years ago. There can be two slot receivers on a play, so they could both be out in the field at the same time. I just, if we're going to kind of give that Martavis Bryant will be back and will have earned his way back into the good graces, I just don't see a way that he's not second on that team in targets and the second most valuable receiver on that team and the second most exciting receiver on that team, and that everybody else is pretty much fighting for scraps, and that if I'm placing bets on who gets more targets between Eli Rogers, the kid who obviously earned Roethlisberger's trust last year and obviously became a pretty big part of that offense when they needed him to, compared to a kid who's never played in the NFL. Like, I don't view it as a good situation at all. And then add in the USC questions and the is he a great athlete questions, and was he was very good towards the end of last year when Sam Darnold started turning it on and started to turn himself into an elite prospect. But was that him or was that Darnold? Because you could probably make the argument one way or the other.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I made the comment multiple times last year that it's going to be Antonio Brown and then a different number 2 wide receiver every week, whether it be Eli Rogers, Sammy Coates, Darius Heyward-Bey. Every week it was somebody different in Pittsburgh. Now you put Martavis back in there, and if he comes back as that true number 2, I agree with you. I don't think there's enough to go around, especially with Le'Veon Bell being such a huge part of that offense. So let's move on to some veteran players, and I know Steve will bring up his Falafel League binky right now. He's always got questions about this guy. So, Steve, go ahead.
I do. I've listened to your podcast ever since you broke off and went out on your own, and you have been a habitual hater of one Kirk Cousins. But this year in your QB ranks, you've got him inched all the way up to number 11. So what is it about him that has finally got you to jump on board the old Cousins bandwagon this year and have him the low-end tight end 1?
quarterback one. Steve, I
Or
thought,
quarterback one, yeah.
I thought you were going to tell me Levin's too low. I'm so excited that you're telling me I'm now properly rating Cousins. I thought you were going to say, how is he not number 4? Like, didn't he finish number 3 or 4 last year? What are you doing, Harris? Like, so I will say, like, and I said this on my show a bunch last year, like, I thought Cousins would be out of a job by the end of 2016. And that obviously is not the case. Like, based on 2015 tape, I just thought his tape was terrible. And his tape was obviously better. He was obviously more mistake free. It's kind of easy. I was very anti-Cousins last year, and it's very much easier to be me when the guy completely poops the bed in the biggest spot. Really, 2 out of the last four games, was it, or maybe 2 out of the last 3 games, completely, screws Washington, and he plays so badly, and they're out of the playoffs. That Giant game is just unforgivable. That last throw is just, you could see it happen in slow motion, even in real time. Like, it's unforgivable. So it becomes easier to be me because people have like a sour taste in their mouth. The concerns with Cousins are, I don't think he's nearly as good as his numbers. I don't think he's like a built-in 4,000-yard passer. And everything's different in that offense. It's not the same play caller, and it's not the same receivers, and it's going to be an interesting transition. What's good about him is that he's better than I thought, and I kind of like Terrell Pryor, and I'd be worried. I'd be worried, but because if he's my starting quarterback in a league where there's a lot of quarterback scarcity, I'm going to be very worried because I think he's got a scary floor. I still have this sensation that I think he goes through ebbs and flows. He was pretty good last year. Joe Flacco's like my ultimate ebb and flow guy, and Cousins was better, no question. But I still worry there's some downside there. But how can I not admit that? I mean, just saw the upside. And it's not Bortles-esque upside. This was more legitimate. This was more like, no, it wasn't just when they're behind, and no, it wasn't just sort of desperation and lucky plays and all that stuff. Some of that, but a lot of really good play. And so that's where I land with him. I mean, I haven't had a Cam Newton, for goodness sake.
Yeah, that is actually almost more surprising. I don't know if that was more surprising or seeing Dak Prescott ahead of him. With Dak Prescott, I'm not sure if he can replicate just a 4 interception season. Yet again, that is my only worry with him. I feel like the turnovers at some point are going to start coming with him.
Yeah, I mean, I can make a case though that Dak Prescott is a top 10 fantasy quarterback even with whatever 8 interceptions. I mean, they just didn't throw it a lot, and I mean, on a team that goes 13-3, essentially 13-2 because they punt away the last game, the quarterback only throws 23 touchdowns with pretty good weapons. And he ran for 6 touchdowns though, and that's right. I think it's 5 or 6, and
yep.
That's likely to come down just because that's the way these things work. It's rare. Then again, I could see the yards going up. Great athlete, like he ran 50 times, I think, and that seems very low for a player of his profile. It's interesting. I mean, I think to some degree, Dak's fate comes down to, are the Cowboys going to take a step back on the offensive line? Do they have to get more balanced? Is there a little bit? I mean, there is an expiration date on the greatest offensive line in the world, right? And They've lost essentially both guards. One of them's moving to tackle. That's not right. They kept one of the guards. I keep saying that on my show too. And then people are like, "What are you talking about?" They have Zach Martin. They're good. They have but they lose the right tackle and they lose the left guard. Or yeah, I think that's right. They're left guard and right tackle. I think it's going to be a slightly more balanced offense. I think Dak's going to be awfully good.
Cool. So these first 2 veteran questions are kind of selfish questions because Steve has Cousins as I think he's like a 15th round keeper in the league that we play in. And for me, I have Jordan Howard. I got him in the 10th round last year. So I get him as a 9th round keeper this year. And I see that you have him ranked, I believe, 10th in standard and 9th in PPR right now. And again, those rankings are from May 3rd, and so much could change between now and then. A lot of people are down on Howard. They don't feel like he could replicate last year's season. I want you to convince the people at home why he's going to actually be a top 5 RB for me this year, Chris.
I don't think I'm going to do that. So it's so interesting, like, to come on your show and to hear that, oh, there are people who are down on Jordan Howard. Because you guys know I say this on my show all the time. Like, I don't pay any attention to ADP or what anybody else is saying until basically mid-August, because I really want my opinion just to be my opinion. So that's, people send me an email like, why is Marshawn Lynch so high? And I'm like, oh, I thought maybe people would have had him higher. Like, I don't know these things. So it's glad to hear that I'm lower on Jordan Howard than the world. I kind of knew that. I figured that I would be. Oh, no, I'm glad to hear there's some people who agree with me on Jordan Howard. So, I mean, we talked right away about the rookies among running backs. I mean, it really is just a tier. It's terrible. Like, it's just running back is terrible, and you're just hoping. And so the case that I would make that Howard does wind up top 5 is that the Bears kind of remain hopeless, because I feel like a large part of the great statistical season for Jordan Howard was kind of the Bears just being hopeless and handing it to him. I mean, he by far, I think maybe by double, led all NFL running backs in rushing yards when this team was losing by 2 touchdowns or more. And like, that's probably not a completely fair criticism, because, well, they may stink again. And then also, okay, but like, they still gave it to him when you'd think they would throw. The worry would be, though, that they sort of just give up. They don't, forget it. It's Mike Glennon. Forget it. Just run. Go ahead. But here's my worry about Jordan Howard is that he's Jeremy Hill. Because you remember after Jeremy Hill's rookie year, big guy, really nice numbers, everybody hypnotized by the yards per carry, 5.0, I believe it was. And all I could see was just sort of another guy, just kind of, he doesn't do anything particularly special. He's really big. And of course, like, compared to regular humans, he's unbelievably special. People that big in real life don't run like that. But by NFL standards, I just don't see Jordan Howard making a lot of cuts that cause a lot of people to fall down. I don't see a lot of linebackers and defensive backs who are chasing him taking bad angles because they can't believe how fast he is. He's good. He's a good player. And I think that's reflected in saying, yeah, there's some upside there. And if I had to take him as like a low end RB1, I guess I'd do it. Maybe because I don't like anybody else around him. I don't really love him as a player. And if 2 years from now he winds up being what Jeremy Hill is now, I actually think that's the likeliest scenario.
So I'll have my heart broken twice because I was so big on Jeremy Hill for so long. So, all right. So speaking of running backs and backfields, let's move on to a couple of crowded backfields. Let's start with Seattle. They went out and signed Eddie Lacy. Thomas Rawls, who just a year ago was considered he's the next Marshawn Lynch. He's an RB1, draft him. And then they added CJ Prosise to come and handle the passing downs. And there's a few other names that are mixed in there. Well, how do you see that shaking out? I know you have Lacy highest right now out of all the guys. Do you think any of them become even a reliable RB2 on a weekly basis in fantasy, or do you think the split is just too much?
We can't legislate. What do I always say? You can't legislate workload. Like, I don't know. I mean, I don't think any of us know. That's the thing, is we're drafting based on total imperfect information. What any of these teams say, PD Sunshine, Pete Carroll, chief among them, is usually a lie and not something that we should be going based on. And so in the end, I just don't know. I think probably that if Eddie Lacy looks like the Eddie Lacy of the first year or two of his NFL career, I don't think the Seahawks feel any compunction to play anyone else, because he was a really good player. I mean, really great feet for how big he is, and obviously a total load to bring down, not a terrible pass catcher. Like, he was an exciting player that first year. And then the second year, he's just progressively kind of gotten less reliable and certainly hurt a lot. I don't, the path to Thomas Rawls being Ahmad Bradshaw, which is always my comparison for him, is that he stays healthy, Eddie Lacy doesn't. And then boom, he's got the potential for a really good workload, at which point I think he's a better player than CJ Prosise, and I think he probably would be the more valuable fantasy commodity. I just, you're ranking these Seahawk running backs, and really I guess everybody, based on kind of the range of possible outcomes. I do think Lacy has the highest in that range of possible outcomes. If he's healthy and somehow, in the Wayback Machine, or just right in a way that he hasn't been right for a couple of years, he can be a really pretty darn good fantasy player. Probably not Marshawn Lynch, probably not elite. It's just not a good enough line for that, I don't think. But I think he could be I think he probably could be a reliable RB2 if he's healthy. And if he's healthy, I don't think anyone else can be.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And I think even last year he had come back and he was averaging 5.1 yards a carry before the injury. I think that he was starting to get himself back into shape and show flashes of the old player that he was. So I'm invested in him heavy in a couple of places. So I do hope that he does win that job and gets the bulk of the touches. Moving over to Cincinnati, you spoke about Jeremy Hill, and we all, we know he gets touchdowns, and that keeps his numbers somewhat relevant. But those touchdowns sometimes come in clusters and, get spread out, and they're not always reliable. Giovanni Bernard is coming back from an injury. He's a guy people have been able to rely on in PPR scenario. Do you think that, and again, very early, but we're just asking you to throw some stuff out there. We're just shooting it back and forth. Do you think Mixon gets the shot to take that job over this year? Or do you think that all three guys are going to remain somewhat involved in that offense?
Yeah, probably. That one feels a little bit more to me like, whereas in Seattle, I can kind of see the scenario where Lacy just is the guy. I think Mixon is the only one I feel that way about in Cincinnati, but I probably feel that way just a little bit less than I do about Lacy. By the same token, really good pass catcher, Lacy not pass catcher. So if I'm comparing them to PPR, I'd rather take the shot on Mixon. To some degree, what the problem with ranking Mixon is that there just is an X% chance that something bad happens. He's done something terrible in his life, and I don't know the person, and so I'm just saying that if we're going to take two people, and one of them has done this thing that is videotaped and horrible, and the other person hasn't, who do I think has a better chance? I'm not guaranteeing he's a terrible human being. I'm not guaranteeing he's going to do something, but there is a little bit more risk with that guy, it would seem to me. So that's just another added complication that makes me go, ugh. It's tough to know what to think. But I will say, like, he's a really good player. I've watched a lot of Oklahoma film, and he's a really, really exciting, good player who can kind of do everything, who is basically like a better, tougher, bigger version of Christian McCaffrey. Like, the reason I have Christian McCaffrey a little bit higher is because he doesn't have the terrible thing in his past, right? That's really what it comes down to. Is I don't think McCaffrey, nothing bad's probably. There's the same percent chance with Christian McCaffrey doing something bad as anybody else, whereas with Mixon, I think it's higher. And then, I just don't think Jeremy Hill's very good, and I think Gio Bernard's a good player, but I just don't. God, after last year with Priest Holmes, like, I'm not going to do that again. I mean, not Priest Holmes, Jamal Charles. I'm already putting Jamal Charles in the Priest Holmes old folks home. But like after that, God, I can't be trusting the torn ACL running back right now. So Mixon feels like the one that we could be in week 4, and he's had a couple of really good games, and the Bengals go, screw it. We know Jeremy Hill's not going to be here next year. Jeremy, congratulations. You're going to get a lot of 1-yard touchdowns. And otherwise, we're giving it to Mixon. Whereas I don't see it possible the other way.
I'm glad you said Jamal Charles. I was actually going to ask you about him a little bit later. Last year, before the season started, I said, that I felt he was done. Grab Spencer Ware. That was my one big. And Spencer Ware didn't exactly run away with the job last year, even though he got the opportunity. But I see a lot of people got excited, and Steve's a Broncos fan, so he was happy when Jamal Charles signed there. I just feel like the guy is done. I think he is in the old age home, like you just said. So do you feel that way? Do you feel there's anything left in that body, or are you in agreement that, hey, listen, this is not Madden football? And I think that a lot of people in today's generation get that, Madden, okay, the guy's going to come back and he's going to step right back in the way he did before he was injured, and that's just not how the real world works. So is Jamal Charles even somebody you're taking a flyer on this year?
You could take a flyer on him, sure. Well, let's see if he makes the team.
Right.
Because if he the answer to that is, how the hell do we know? Like, you don't know that he doesn't have anything left in his body, and I don't know that he does. There's no way of knowing. Right. Zero, literally no way of knowing, literally. So the only way to know is if he makes the team. If he's got something left and he makes that team, I mean, he's a fantasy factor. He just is. That means the Broncos, pretty smart organization, think he has something left. At which case, a Jamal Charles with something left is better than anything else they have, and I would be very interested. But I think there's a definite chance that he gets into camp and he gets knee swelling and he just doesn't look good and he can't cut, and they go, dude, what are we even doing here, right? And then he heads off into the sunset, like. The Priest Holmes home, apparently, is what I'm calling it.
So like you're saying, so in that backfield, you feel like there's nothing else there. So you're not high on C.J. Anderson. you feel maybe Devontae Booker could overtake him, or what did you look into that backfield outside of Jamal Charles?
I didn't say there's nothing else there. I said he'd be the best if he had something left.
Gotcha.
He'd be the best player there because he's not going to make the Hall of Fame, but he's in the Hall very good. Like he's a truly special player in his time. In my ranks, I have Jamal Charles third, and we'll just I'm among those three guys, and like we'll see. We'll see. If he makes the team and people are saying glowing things, and we actually watch him cut, and it looks like he's able to do it, I'll be tempted to raise him for sure. If not, though, the two C.J. Anderson, Devontae Booker, I don't think C.J. Anderson's like a great player. He looked very good for a few weeks very early in the season before that Broncos offensive line was completely exposed, and I was totally fooled by that line. I mean, it looked so good against I remember Carolina and Indy and Tampa. I remember thinking, oh my God, they've done it again. And then by the end of the year, it was bottom 5 in the league. It was so terrible. And, they've changed a lot of pieces. It's a lot of new guys. I like some of the new pieces. The Cowboy guard, Ronald Leary, that we were talking about leaving, he's in Denver now. He's a good player. I don't view it as a great situation. I don't view the quarterback as a great situation. There's some great receivers, but not really a great line. So if you're going to tell me it's Anderson and Booker again, I say, someone's going to have a good game, and then someone's going to have not a good game, and everybody's going to overreact, and then everybody's going to be like, oh, I got fooled. I don't know that I think those two players. I had some hopes for Booker last year, and I think athletically he's probably a better version of C.J. Anderson, but hold on to the ball, dude. There's a reason Matt Jones doesn't have a job right now. You have to. So C.J. Anderson for me gets the slight nod, but I don't love either one.
But before I let Steve ask his next question, I'll just say to anybody who's listening, before I get to Jamal Charles hate, Jamal Charles, like Christopher said, he's an all-time epic fantasy player. So I don't want to downgrade what he's meant to people who play fantasy and the joy he's brought to owners over the years. I just personally, I've been down on him the last 2 years. So I will say to the Chiefs fans and to the Bronco fans, since I am a Raider fan, I'm not trying to just, poop on your parade. So, Steve, take it away.
I don't believe you, and we will go ahead and move on. You mentioned being fooled by the likes of a C.J. Anderson. I think a lot of people were fooled last year by Devontae Parker heading into the season. He's had a lot of hype the last 2 years, and you've got him ranked with Jarvis Landry. They're pretty far apart. You're higher on Landry. I'm not going to tell anybody. You guys can go check out harrisfootball.com to look at those ranks, but Devontae Parker is somebody that did seem to come on towards the end of last year. So I know you're a film guy. Did you like what you saw at the end of last year? And how many games like those types of production will you have to see this year before you really start to inch them closer and maybe even have Parker overtake Landry?
Yeah, I'm going to be open. I kind of, I was really kind of hoping Kenny Stills wasn't coming back because anything you're going to say about Devontae Parker's film or results or whatever, you kind of have to say, oops, but then Kenny Stills was the one who actually saved them in the playoffs and, was very crucial to them making the playoffs. And so I worry that it's Ryan Tannehill, and am I really going to get super excited about any of them? And in the end, isn't the whole reason Jarvis Landry is, a borderline fantasy star because Ryan Tannehill's there? He just doesn't have the ability to do anything else other than throw it 7 yards to Jarvis Landry. So listen, Devontae Parker, I like him a lot. I liked his film a lot. I think he has that Des Bryant thing, that thing of sort of just knowing when to accelerate and knowing just sort of the body control thing. I think there's potential there for it to be very exciting. And I look at my own list and I see him behind Jeremy Maclin and I go, Harris, what were you doing? Jeremy Maclin, really? But then I go, oh, but 2 years ago, Jeremy Maclin was freaking awesome. Last year he was just hurt. So I can see what I was thinking, but I can also see someone going, no, I'm not. I'm going to take a shot on Devontae Parker's upside over Jeremy Maclin, Deshaun Jackson, Jamison Crowder, Golden Tate. Give me, I get that. There's a danger every year there's a danger of falling in love with the guys who have never done it. And I know you want to be the one to pick the player who does it while he's on your team for the first time, but what's safer? Just pick the guys that that have done it many a times and will be on your team, and you don't have to be that clever. It's the Dante Moncrief thing. Like I have Parker and Moncrief right around the same spot. I think they both have crazy upside, but they both could just do absolutely nothing. They could just not help you at all. So I'm excited for Devontae Parker to be good. I'm not. I'm just. I don't know. Do you guys look at Ryan Tannehill and think that he'll ever be even an above average quarterback in the NFL? Because I just don't.
No, I think we've already seen his best days, and they haven't been too great.
Yeah.
Let's talk about something. It's right in your backyard. A player that was traded this year over to the New England Patriots, and that's Brandon Cooks. Knowing what you know about that offense and how it runs and how it's typically spread out to a lot of different people. I mean, Edelman always gets his receptions, but each week, you have Hogan will come up with a big catch and Mitchell will come up with a big catch. And while Amendola was there, it was him. And, Matt Langel comes out of nowhere and makes a catch one week. Do you think that Brandon Cooks could be a consistent, reliable wide receiver one in fantasy? Because I think a lot of people are drafting or buying him thinking that that's the way he's going to play.
I mean, the consistent is just people are barking up the wrong tree. It won't be consistent, but I do think that he's going to win you some weeks. He's going to be like a turbocharged version of what we think of Deshaun Jackson, where there are going to be weeks where they just don't throw it to him because they're unbelievably game plan specific. Week by week, they change the game plan. They're not one of those stubborn, we do what we do guys. They will literally change everything. Nomenclature to personnel, all the way down to everything and it can be extremely frustrating to own those players. Hey, was Edelman any good in the first half of last year? He was garbage. I mean, people were dropping him, and he turns out with a fine season because he was good towards the end, but he was scary. It was scary, right? And I mean, Martellus Bennett, 1 week great, next week where'd he go? Even when Gronk's out, right? And I think probably consistent won't be the word with Brandon Cooks either, and that's why he's not a wide receiver one. But especially in a standard league, and I think in a PPR league too, I think he's probably a wide receiver too, as long as you pair him with the right or put him with the right other receivers on your fantasy team, just the more consistent contributors. Because I don't believe Tom Brady has an aversion to throwing it down the field. I mean, if Chris Hogan can make plays down the field, my God, I know Brandon Cooks can. And it's just a very, very difficult team to defend. And they are loaded again, and they have a million weapons, and they're going to have five guys in pass patterns a lot, and Brady knows where to go with the ball. I according to cousin Josh on my show, I was too high on Brandon Cooks. He thought, no, you're crazy. He and Edelman need to be closer together because it's just going to be a crapshoot every week. And I say, of that group, one of them 4 times a year is going to just win you a week. I think Cooks could do that.
Yep, I absolutely agree with that. The most consistent person on the team, running backs, tight ends, wide receivers, is Tom Brady, quarterback. He is the one guy that you can pick every week, and you can assume that he is going to produce and get something for you. So before we let you out of here, Chris, I know you are a betting man. You have got the Harris After Dark podcast, and you talk spreads every week, which is very I enjoy that quite a bit. So the 2017 win totals came out far too early. It is only May. But a couple of them caught my eye, so I wanted to just ask you real quick what your thoughts on these few were. We will start with your beloved Patriots, whose over-under win total is set at 12.5. What do you think about that?
I mean, I have to go over, but it's insane to go over on 12.5. It's a no play. I mean, I don't think you can play it because it's insane to go over 12.5. Too many things can go wrong. Like if you have $100, that is not where you should invest it on the over 12.5 on anybody, right? But no, I mean, they look loaded and nobody else looks loaded. It feels like how they're not winning 13, 14 games. There is certainly a way, and frankly, the way is that Tom Brady pulls a Peyton Manning and just suddenly isn't Tom Brady anymore. But I think I'd be tempted to go over, but I don't love it.
All right. Betting is all about the public perception. So they just saw what they just did. They're all hot in people's minds. So definitely a good number to make people think about it. The next one is going to be the Ravens, and they are oddly enough set at 9.5.
And you say oddly enough because you would have expected it to be lower.
Yes, I would.
Yeah, I think I would probably play the under there. There's sort of a lingering faith in John Harbaugh that I don't necessarily share, and I think one more bad year and he's done there. And the quarterback isn't great, and The offensive line is sort of not great anymore. It's okay. And the receivers aren't great. And I don't think anybody thinks the running backs are great. It doesn't feel like an offense that's just going to score all that much. And maybe they've fixed the secondary. I think they realized finally after 5 years since the Super Bowl, basically, that they needed to fix the secondary. Maybe they have. Maybe just throwing some bodies there. They had a couple of nice signings, but I don't view it as a super elite defense anymore either. And maybe they're a little bit more sort of name than game at this point.
Yeah, the biggest argument I'm hearing for them is that they had so many injuries on defense that really led to a lot of their losses, but I'm not sure if that's enough to make up to get them to 10 wins, which is what you'd have to hit to get that over.
Right, because like in the end, Jimmy Smith, that's the one you're like, oh, if they'd had Jimmy Smith, they'd have been great. Like, I mean, he's nominally their number one corner. He'll be healthy to start the year. And I know there are other defensive injuries. I'm just being flip because I'm a jerk. But like, if he's the player that you're like, no, he's going to rescue us. I don't know. I don't think he is. He's never been yet.
I would absolutely agree there. The next one on the list, maybe a little more difficult, is the Minnesota Vikings. They're set at 8.5.
Yeah, that is really difficult. I'd say that's probably in the no play territory for me. That's so bold. I'm 2 of the 3 you've asked me. I'm no play, but I also have to give you a pick. And I just hate Sam Bradford so much. I just, not personally, I'm sure he's a very nice man. I just think he's awful. I think he's just awful. And the moment that team, we remember how well that team started, right? They were going to win the NFC. They were great. And then the second half of the year, they just hit the skids. And I love the coach, and I sort of do love the philosophy, and I really like the defense, and I don't think it's inconceivable, but they are a 7, 8, or 9 win team. They're built to be that. They're not going to win 5, right? They're okay. I will say under, but that's another one I don't feel great about.
You just broke our good friend Scott Fish's heart with the under on that one.
All right, moving to the always exciting NFC West. We have the Arizona Cardinals set at 7.5, 7.5 wins.
I think I go over. That feels like a good one to me. I realize that a lot hinges on Carson Palmer, and there's a sense, I think, that is maybe born from fantasy that Palmer had a terrible year because, he was so great in 15, and we drafted him to be fantasy starters, as we should have. Coming off with those weapons and coming off of that season, he should have been viewed as a fantasy starter to start the year, and he was not for a lot of it. But I didn't think he played that poorly. I thought they lost like 3 games. They should have beaten the Patriots opening night. Like, they lost stupidly. They lost a game they tied against Seattle, or they tied a game against Seattle. They should have kicked a field goal and won. Like, it strikes me that there was a lot of bad luck involved there. And you talk about defense I really like. I know they lost Calais Campbell, so there are questions like you might be able to run on them. But if you can't run on them, you're dead, because that is a killer secondary and deep secondary. And I there's enough there offensively. I mean, David Johnson's a pretty good player. I think that's a pretty easy over for me.
Yep, I would agree. Much like the Patriots being so high, everyone remembers the Cardinals being so bad in 2016, so that number does seem a little bit low. And the last one for me, AFC East foe for the New England Patriots. We have the New York Jets set at 5.5.
Under.
Yeah.
I don't think they want to win 5 games. I think if they win 5 games, they're going to view the year as deep in their hearts, not the players, but I think the organization realizes, and it could wind up being that costs the coach his job, and frankly, it could cost the GM his job. They fooled everybody their first year there by making the playoffs, by being pretty interesting team, and it was just so old, and they made so many bad decisions last year, and now they have to start over. I think it's the worst team maybe in the NFL, and maybe like a 2-win team.
Cleveland loves to hear you say that.
Speaking of Cleveland, I live in New York, Chris, and I'm just a Raider fan since I'm a little kid. Since way back in the Marcus Allen days, that was my original favorite player. But I let my son be a free agent and root for whoever he wanted, and he picked the Jets. And he came to me. He came to me when the schedule was released, and he's telling me, I think they're going to get 5 or 6 wins. I said, where are they getting 5 or 6 wins from? So when he got to Cleveland, I said, you're not better than Cleveland. I know it's hard to accept that, but you're not going to beat Cleveland. So
At least
I
not
agree with you.
automatically better. At least not automatically better, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
that's going to be a good game.
it's the Josh McCown revenge game. That's all. Except he'll have like lost 3 limbs by then. I don't know what week they play, but I thought your son came up to you and said with the Jet schedule, "Daddy, why is there no God?"
Oh, we got a whole podcast. We can get into that. All right. So, Chris, I really, we both appreciate you coming on, and it's May. It's very early, but there's so many people out there who are just, craving football talk. So we're trying to bring it to them. And we really appreciate you taking time out of what I'm sure is a busy schedule as you get ready for the season to come on and talk with us. If you can, what you said last year when you were on, boy, it sounds like I put my name on a lot of stuff. Tell our listeners all the stuff that you're involved in, because you're not just about football. I mean, you're a writer. You have some great novels out. War of Sound is your newest novel, and I actually just looked into that today, and it does sound very, very intriguing. I think I might take a peek at that. But give everybody at home where they can find you on social media and what you're up to these days.
You can find me on social media at Harris Football. I am actually not doing the podcast until I believe July 7th is my next show. Because there's nothing to talk about. Sorry. I mean, present company accepted, of course, but like in the end, the conversation that we just had is going to have to be repeated in 3 months, right? Because none of it will apply anymore.
So I sort of thank you.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, I'm glad to do it. It's actually a good time to come on other shows since I'm not doing my own. But in the end, like I feel like if I do shows now, I run out of content by the end of August. I've said this already. Everybody's heard me say this already. So if people want to hear, you can actually go back though. I did shows after the NFL draft, so you can hear sort of my logic on my fantasy ranks and my feelings about the rookies. And I do have some fiction out there. War on Sound, book.com if people are interested. And that's what I got.
Excellent. Well, thank you again, Chris, and we look forward to when you do get back on the air and checking out those updated rankings. Thank you again for coming on. Have a good night.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Chris.
Okay, so listen, I mean, that went smoothly. Kevin wasn't here. We got that fun with the guest for once, which was nice.
That's right.
We got to make jokes, and I can't imagine it could have went any better. Steve, I know you agree. I don't even want to ask you. I don't need your opinion.
All right, fair enough.
We're going to get to our final thoughts. So, Steve, take it away, and I'll try not to screw mine up.
All right. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Falafel House Fantasy Football Podcast. You can find us on Twitter at Falafel House. You can search for us on Instagram and Facebook. Just search for Falafel House there. You can also check out falafelhouse.com, where we are putting out some articles to try and get you through these dog days of summer that have not started yet but are getting close. It is just the downtime in the NFL. So we're trying to keep you guys a little bit entertained on there. I know Sean and I have just put out an article last week about our win totals. Shai Ruxin has put out an article about our 2017 fantasy football power rankings going by team there. So go ahead and check that out. And I think that's all I got. Tonight, Sal. What do you got?
That's awesome, because I have been doing absolutely nothing.
True.
I've contributed as little as possible.
Fact.
And I'm just making the rounds on Twitter and talking to people about fantasy football. We're mock drafting for the Scott Fish Bowl already. One started today, and it's the Fish Bowl season, guys. So we'll be talking about that a lot coming up, and maybe having some guests, maybe Scott himself, to talk about this year's Scott Fish Bowl. In the meantime, do all that stuff that Steve just talked about. And you could also check us out on the Dynasty Happy Hour podcast network on dynastyhappyhour.com. There are a ton of great shows on there, a great group of guys that we are happy to be a part of. So thank you guys for listening. Kevin's going to be back next time, so keep this one, save this one. He has to, because he put up a third of the money.
All right.
But save this one and come back and listen. And until that time, Steve, eat a muffin.